Yeah, since we have talked about market-driven innovation and benchmarks, I would like you to give us more examples about those big questions you have been studying in MediaX or ACI. What kind of big questions related, not just the productivity like you just showed, I mean the big questions related to the market, to consumers, can help our CEOs and top managers here knowing that how they should think in advance. And to Mr. 施先生，要麻烦您帮忙给一个例子，就是说您是 Acer 的 founder， 那这些年来你有没有问过自己什么样的大哉问，然后可以去遥想遥远的未来，就是从当年您就怎么样问您自己一些很大的问题，然后会主导说让您在创业一直到后来的所有经营过程中间可以比较市场导向，或者说有进一步的一些想法。Okay, so would you please, three of you, just give us some examples about the big questions, so we can learn from you.
The big questions are sometimes scary, and the reason that they're scary is because you may be able to ask a question that you can't answer, and that is scary sometimes. Some of the big questions that we have dealt with at MediaX at Stanford University have to do with, well, for example, in 2005, it became evident that the people who were using the internet wanted to contribute. Out of that grew user-generated content, which we take for granted now. But at one time, the question of what do we do with the people who the audience wants to participate, what are we going to do? That was a big question. One of the questions that we have addressed has had to do with the fusion of virtual and physical reality. At your computer, at your desk, there are physical items in front of you. There might be some items that are more in the distance. Through the screen, you have a number of windows that can take you anywhere. The layering of those different realities and what it means to your work style and to your perception of the world is new. We didn't have that at one point in time. And the fusion of virtual and physical environments is something that we are now learning how to, we are just at the beginning of learning how to address that. There was a time when Second Life was new, that an immersive environment was a destination. Now, in the screen-based communications that we have, we often have a sense of virtual reality, whether it's in avatars or animated characters, that we kind of take for granted. And the technology is good enough that sometimes you can't tell if it really is the person acting, if it's Angelina Jolie, or if it is her avatar that's created from digital representations. I think two questions that are quite interesting to me at this point have to do with exchange, value exchange. And as we look at some new currencies such as Bitcoin, which has no national jurisdiction, but seems to be growing globally and actually is traded. What's the basis for value exchange? That's a question that I don't quite know how to ask even. But that's the kind of question that's good to ask the thought leaders of Stanford to see how they would approach it. Another has to do with digital identity. What do we know about our digital identity and how that shapes the way that we will use devices, use an environment of devices, and an ambient intelligence that's likely to go along with that? Is my digital identity the same as my physical identity? Is it different? How is it different? What does that mean for the services that I use and for the way that I represent myself and the way that I perceive myself? How's that for a couple big questions?
Yeah, I'd like to give a couple of big questions in a moment as well, but I liked your comment, Martha, of saying they're often scary. They're not only scary, but they're also difficult to get your hands around, right? I mean, difficult to define in the sense of it is often not really clear what would even be an answer to that particular question. So you don't necessarily know what would be a commercial outcome that you could create based on a big question. So I think, therefore, it's very, very difficult to ask the big questions and to act on the big questions as part of daily business. And that's how I think CCC comes in, because if you worked with CCC, you could step back, look at these questions, maybe leave them up to some others, or in a collaborative fashion, in a non-threatening environment, in a seminar or in a workshop, to explore those sorts of questions. And I think that's what also the collaborators do with you, Martha, at MediaX. Now, let me give you some examples of that as it was done at the institute that I'm currently directing in Singapore at ACI. One is from a business that not many of you may be in, the beauty business, with a company that you all know, Unilever. Unilever is, of course, a huge international company. They have lots of beauty products, but occasionally they also ask themselves the big question, well, what is beauty? Right? I mean, we have all these products nowadays that we can put in our faces to beautify ourselves somehow, to moisturize our skin, or maybe make our skin lighter, to color our hair or make it shinier, right? That's the sort of business that they are in. There are also new technologies that create more radical changes of beauty. I mean, just look at Korea and the explosion of plastic surgery in Korea, right? I mean, everybody gets fixed up every part of their face and the rest of the body. So the question is ultimately what is beauty? What is considered beauty? And is the idea of beauty becoming a universal concept, meaning that everybody views beauty the same way? Or is it actually a very culturally specific concept? So the concept for a Chinese of what is beautiful is very, very different from a Korean. It's very, very different from an Indian, from an Indonesian. So this was one of the big questions that we addressed through various things, focus groups, talking to experts, doing also a cultural analysis of art, for example, and how art was how in art beauty manifested itself in various cultures through the centuries. For example, when you're looking at sculptures or when you're looking at paintings. So this was one of the projects we've done. We've done some other projects. One on online learning, similar to the one that you're doing. That's a big, big topic right now in any educational institution. How do students, as well as you as managers, want to learn in the future? What is the best medium, the best platform for learning? And to what degree do you want actual face-to-face interactions? And to what degree should it be done online? And what is the right combination of the two? So it's a big question that we are currently doing a project on at ACI. We've also done a project with BlackBerry. BlackBerry has huge problems still because they're not particularly customer focused, actually. So we did a project on customer focus for BlackBerry in particular markets like Asian markets, Indonesia, and so on. But I wanted to mention just sort of a personal view that I have on the technology business, and in particular consumer electronics, because many of you are related to that sort of business, especially here in Taiwan. When you look at innovation in that business, it has been drastic over the last 2 decades. The questions will continue like this. Based on the last 2 decades, you might say, yes, of course, we will further revolutionize people's lives, just as we have revolutionized their life over the last 10, 15 years. Through the apps, for example, through making the devices smaller and smaller in terms of providing all sorts of communication, social media. These are all radical changes. People live their lives differently nowadays because of those technologies. But will it continue? Well, here's a perspective. What the industry has beautifully addressed over the last 10, 15 years is one particular aspect of people's lives, and that is the fact that people move around, that you're not stationary. You're not just lying in bed or sitting on a couch, right? You're going to work, you're traveling, you're going out at night, so you're mobile. And we have fantastic mobile devices now. The mobile devices are smaller and smaller, right? On those mobile devices, we are constantly reachable wherever we are. And these mobile devices allow us to communicate with everybody anytime. That's a huge, huge improvement of people's lives. Now, will that continue? I think there's still some innovation to be gained there if you're not just thinking communication through these devices, but if you're thinking transactions through these devices. So I think there's still a whole round coming about payments that are going through these phones. There's a whole round of innovation coming with respect to other commercial transactions, like tying in the mobile phone with retailing and all of that. I think there's clearly more innovation coming. But keep in mind, a lot of this is just one aspect of people's lives. So I'll give you a totally different one. And that is other aspects of a communication. And that is when I'm talking to somebody, when I'm interacting with somebody, the person immediately understands me. There's no communication problem through the language. We can read a lot about people, how they feel by how they are reacting in their nonverbal behavior and their gestures. But we still have, when you look at devices, they're still unbelievably dumb. And that's a technical term, by the way, dumb devices. They're unbelievably dumb in terms of reading that. I mean, speech recognition systems have to be customized like crazy to an individual user, right? The face recognition systems in a dynamic context are terrible. Robotics is only good in a very clearly defined environment. So when it comes to this, our technologies are still very, very far removed from people's daily lives. So there is a big question. And that is, how can we bring technologies to a more natural interaction between people? I think that's a big, big question. That could result in numerous new products, numerous new apps, numerous new platforms that we can't even imagine. And that is a question that I think can only be solved, of course, through collaboration, through networks, by working, for example, with universities, with think tanks, with thinkers, and doing those sorts of collaborations.
I love the challenge, and let me build on it, if I may, because I think that while we think we've arrived, we've only just begun. And you talk about the expansion of technologies to make people's lives easier. And we may be talking about individuals, as in individual devices, but most of the individual devices may have 20, coming soon, 50 sensors on them that are always on, always able to communicate the temperature, the state of, the environment, information that can, for large numbers of people in cities or in offices, make their lives better automatically. And the smart environment, the smart city, that's based on information that is ubiquitous and collected by people carrying their devices around, is just at the frontier.